Thank you for tuning in to the Black Money Tree Podcast, hosted by entrepreneur, investor, and philanthropist Jerome D. Love. We are committed to teaching you how to build wealth so that you can build your community. At the Black Money Tree, our goal is to empower wealth creation and create economic self-sufficiency in order to empower generations to come. Society grows great when old men plant trees whose shade they know they shall never enjoy. Season 1 is powered by Wells Fargo Bank. Welcome to the Black Money Tree Podcast.
Welcome to the Black Money Tree Podcast. My name is Jerome D. Love, and I'm super excited to be here today and be with our guests. And I'm super excited about the Black Money Tree Wealth Development System and the podcast, because we are committed to helping you build wealth, because we feel that that's instrumental in building our communities. When you look at the African American and the Black community, there's a huge wealth gap. And a lot of that is a result of some of the things that's happened in the past, but at the end of the day, it's also some of the things that we're doing that's happening in the future. So we're committed. Most of the podcasts that we've done, this one is kind of a special one. We have talked about more proactive steps to help you build wealth. And we're going to talk about that today, but we're going to also talk about some of the lesser known historical reasons for the position of African Americans when it comes to wealth. Before we get to our guest, who I'm really excited about, I'm going to encourage you to go to the website and be sure to get the new book, which is Closing the Wealth Gap. And it's on the website. This gives you tips and tools on building your wealth in the area of real estate. We've also uploaded some online courses in the area of real estate where you can learn how to deal with contractors, how to manage your property, because one of our primary pillars in building wealth is real estate. I'm a real estate guy, been in it for over 22 years, and I believe it's one of the easiest and most predictable ways to build wealth. The other area is entrepreneurship. Now, a lot of times people will ask me, what do I say is the key to my success? And I say unequivocally, the most important key to my success are the mentors, the advisors that stand behind me and give me counsel. Very few of the things that you guys see me do, I do without talking and asking someone else. And today we have one of my top advisors, if you will. I know I get on his nerves calling him all the time, but we have Dr. Charles Moody. He has a Bachelor of Arts in Psychology from the University of Texas at Austin. He has a doctorate in Strategic Leadership from Regents University, and he's somewhat of a historian. He's a counselor. He's an entrepreneur. He's also a pastor, and I'd like to welcome to the Black Money Tree Podcast. Dr. Moody, welcome to the Black Money Tree Podcast.
Thank you so much, Jerome. I appreciate you inviting me. Good to see you.
Yes, sir. It's an honor and a privilege to have you. I told you in the break, you're trying to show me up with all those books to show how much smarter you are than me, man. So I don't know if I appreciate that.
Hey, you always, you're teaching us and you're teaching people that there are secrets and processes and principles behind everything. And one of the things that I've learned is that that's true. And so you have to read about some of the processes and principles behind things to see why they are the way they are.
Yeah. No, I 100% agree. And one of the reasons, you're the first episode that we've done where I really want to go into some of the historical things that's happened to African Americans. Part of the reason for that, I wrote an article for the Forward Times magazine in the wake of George Floyd, and I researched the police department. And I began to understand, you heard some of the stuff, it's the ex-Klansmen, the ex-slave patrol and stuff like that.
Correct.
And when you understand the history of the police department, you understood how it evolved. And it went from being controlled by the money brokers to being controlled by the politicians to now the mob and the illegal, so you understand how the core of it was somewhat corrupted. But one of the things we often talk about slavery, we often talk about Jim Crow, we talk about how blacks are behind the eight ball economically. But one of the things I did know about, I'd heard about it, was a Freedmen's Bank. And I heard you do a talk on that. Talk a little bit about some of the things, the lesser known things that have happened to African Americans in history that has kind of set us back, and specifically the Freedmen's Bank. I was very intrigued by that story. So go ahead, I'll let you talk.
Okay. Well, it's interesting that you the podcast is called the Black Money Tree, because you have to, if to understand the fruit of the tree, you got to see where the roots come from.
Yeah.
And when we talk about the history of where black economics, where it originated from, of course, we're talking about slavery, and then when Abraham Lincoln got into office and proclaimed, or emancipated the slaves. We talk about the idea. Ironically, it's funny. Abraham Lincoln was a Republican. And so it was a Republican Party that pushed that. But things have changed, and we can talk about that if you like. But one of the things that he pushed for a lot of policies that dealt with how to deal with the economics of the freed slaves, and the economics of this, these millions of people that are now going to be freed, and trying to get the North and the South back on the same page. There's a lot of compromise that had to go on, because when we talk about economics, we also have to talk about really policies that have, and political policies more than anything, that have really transpired or have milked or guided the economic situation of African Americans. Well, after his assassination, the world, or the United States, was kind of in a shock and in a quandary, because now how do we handle some of these policies and promises that he made, and what do we do? We can't do we're not going to do the 40 acres. We're not going to do the mule. We're not going to do all these things, these concepts. So one concept that was developed was this idea in March 3rd, 1865, the Freemen's Bureau, the Freeman Saving and Trust Bureau. And this was supposed to be a bank that would house the monies of these sharecroppers and these ex-slaves and what have you. So they would have a place where they could deposit their resources and deposit their money. So if you can imagine, there was a big push and a big marketing push to build the trust, to get people to actually be willing to invest their money there, because it was supposed to be a safe space, a place where all of your, if you can imagine, you're an ex-slave. If you can imagine, you are a sharecropper. And so when we say all of your money, this hardworking, blood, sweat, and tears money that you're now trying to grow. And so African Americans invested millions of dollars. I mean, right after slavery, millions of dollars into this Freedmen's Bureau, this Freedmen Saving and Trust. And the government did a lot to market, a lot to push and promote the idea, but the regulations of the Freedmen's Bureau were not in place. And so they weren't actually regulated by a banker. They weren't actually regulated by somebody who understood, economics. And because of that, years and years of misregulation and misappropriation, and the years and years of mismanagement led to the Freedmen's Bank going under, literally going belly up. And if you can imagine, millions of dollars just go away. It just goes away, and now you've lost all of your savings. You've lost everything. This threw us. What we were already behind because of slavery, but there was a real push and effort to build up some economic strength, and then that was erased through mismanagement and governmental mismanagement, and really governmental not even planning the process correctly and processing, planning the oversight of it. So now this money goes away. And now you're stuck at zero with no repercussions, no way to get that back. So you're back at square one. And so if you could think, you take millions away from this generation of ex-slaves from the get-go. Now we are not only are we 400 years behind, but now all the money that we've tried to accumulate, in the few years we've been free, is gone again. Then when in the South, because it was a primary agricultural community and economic base, you have the Jim Crow laws and the massacres that led to what we call the Great Migration. Many people from the South left their homes, left their land, left all of that work because of just fear for their lives, and migrated up to the North for, once again, economic opportunity, the opportunity to build my economics and to have my family grow into a safe area, grow in a safe area. Well, as they migrated up to the north, then once again, politics and racism kicks in because then many companies and organizations were threatened by the idea of, if you hire these African Americans, what happens to our people? What happens to our systems? And so they migrated to the north with great expectations, but were left, but were met with a lot of hindrances on hiring practices, a lot of hindrances on wages and things like that. And so not only were they not able to live where they wanted to live, but now they couldn't work, and they weren't given the same opportunity economically, although they moved. So if you can imagine, you leave your economic base in one area of the country to go to another economic base, and that economic base is then limited for you and locks you in.
So,
In
so Dr. Moody,
1930.
I'm so sorry. Let me ask you a quick
No, go ahead.
question. So let's not glaze over the political piece. You talked about Abraham Lincoln being a Republican, and you talked about the politics that's behind a lot of the systems that are in place. Most African Americans tend to think Democrats are pro-black and Republicans are anti-black. Where does that originate from? And would you agree with that from from an economic policy perspective?
Okay, so let's go back. Let's go back a little history. So when Abraham Lincoln, when after the assassination, the Freeman, then you have a major issue because you have these political parties and these promises that have been given, and the real big issue was, economics. How does American economics move from the southern states, which were primary agricultural, to the northern states, which were looking more at industry and looking at trying to modernize a lot of process and whatever else. You have that, so there was a big even push to urbanize. People were moving to cities, so you had all this going on. Well, one of the compromises that happened right after the assassination, because the Abraham Lincoln had to send, before he passed, he had to send U.S. military down to the South to help monitor and help manage the violence that was erupting from the Jim Crow era, and so you had U.S. military that were in these southern states, in these southern areas. Well, after the assassination, one of the compromises was they're going to move those military people out. So those military people then retreated or moved back, or were told their assignment changed. Let's just put it that way. And so now you have, once their assignment changed, you have the unleashing or the freeing up of many of the Jim Crow laws and how should I put it, the people to enforce Ku Klux Klan, things like that. They were allowed to kind of run wild. That was a cause. That was a political compromise that had economic ramifications, because it had physical ramifications in terms of safety, and then that led to a migration that was still hindered and blocked.
Was there a particular party that supported that initiative, or where does Democrat and Republican come in at this point? Or did I stop you too early before you got there?
You stopped me. You stopped
Okay,
me a
I'm
little
sorry.
too early.
Okay, all right.
But bottom line is, it had to be a compromise, because one of the things that happens is, and there's always compromises about power and who remains in power. And whenever there's discussions about who remains in power, there's always winners and losers. And oftentimes we have been the losers. So that was a big push. So many blacks the first blacks to even be voted into Congress were Republicans and everything else, because that was really a push. The Republicans were known as more progressive, more thinking about change, and then you have the Democrats, especially the Southern Democrats, who were about keeping and maintaining the status quo and maintaining the systems. Well, if you remember a name, I think it's Strom Thurmond.
Yeah.
He was a Southern Democrat. I'm sorry. He was very powerful and very prominent in the area of politics for years. And one of the problems that happened was many people in the Republican Party were becoming more and more progressive, and many people in the Democratic Party were really more conservative. But as time went on, he did not like the idea of many of the Republican, how should I put it, the Republican aggressiveness, the Republican not lack of conservatism, the Republican way of trying to be progressive and trying to change things. And so there became Republicans that began to switch to really the Democratic Party, to move away from and become more and more conservative. And so you saw this kind of outlay of, it wasn't so much Republicans and Democrats as it really was, Jerome, people who were conservative and trying to preserve a certain status quo, and people who were who were more progressive or more liberal. And so you had a real progressive and conservative versus liberal idea that was really fighting itself. And this got convoluted in the parties. And so eventually some of the Republicans didn't think that they thought that they were becoming a little too liberal, and then they even slid into a third party. So you saw these parties start to split based upon conservatism and progressivism. That was the main thing, and that conservatism and progressivism had a lot to do with economics. Where was money going to go? Where was power going to go? And how was economics going to be swayed? Well, literally, you saw, and I'm going to make a big jump, because when you see the New Deal coming in, the New Deal comes in, and everybody talks about this great New Deal and this great labor standards that are going to be put out, and we talk about how it was so beneficial. But even in the New Deal, one of the things they did was they excluded things like standards on agricultural services. So they said, we're going to make all these labor standards and make sure that they're fair labor standards for all workers, including time off and these kind of things. But they excluded purposely. That was part of the compromise to get the deal passed. Was they excluded services and agricultural services in terms of they didn't have those same rights. Who was working in those areas? We were. And so you always have this compromise.
So my dad was a farmer, and we still have land in Louisiana for close to about 200 acres. And in the mid 80s, there was a drought. Crops weren't producing. We went bankrupt. Same thing happened to a lot of the white farmers. The government bailed out and assisted a lot of the white farmers, but not the black farmers. Right around 2000, 2001, there was a large lawsuit that was settled, and the government had to pay a lot of the black farmers, of which my parents were a part of that. It's interesting how you talk about as well. I saw the documentary, I forgot the name of it, but the one by Tariq Nasheed, and he talked about the origins of unions and how ultimately unions, you had to be in a union to get certain jobs, but of course you couldn't get in the union typically if you were black. So all of that was really designed to determine where monies were spent. Would you agree? And what
Yeah.
go ahead.
Policies, and I always say policies actually direct the flow of economics and money. Governmental policies and whatever else. So when we see these laws being passed and these compromises, the back door, they're compromises on where the economic flow is going to go and where it's not going to go. It's very interesting because when you see parts of laws being taken out, those are meetings, those are compromises because you need this vote and they will pass this law or this statute, but they want this part to be excluded. And many times those parts that are excluded, eradicated, or changed or altered deal specifically with where they want money to flow, where they want economic power to exist or to be promoted. So we see this constantly over and over again. Everybody's familiar with the GI Bill, Jerome. Everybody that's such an most people know about the GI Bill, and if you go out and you serve, then you will come back, and there's certain rights, privileges, in terms of house purchases and things like that you have. Well, in 1944, you remember the GI Bill. People are coming back from the war, and what's interesting is that many of if you look at the GI Bill and you look at how many people actually took advantage of that to buy real estate, Jerome, which we know is a major promoter of economic and generational wealth. The overwhelming majority of those GI Bill lending policies were directed toward whites and away from African Americans. Well, how was that so? Didn't everybody serve? Didn't everybody do what they did? Yes. But remember, you also had, at that time, you had redlining, which says that listen, we will allow you to get a loan on houses that are in this district or this area or this place in the city. And they would literally, the redlining is that, literally you could see there was a red line around areas that were not allowed, that you weren't allowed to get these loans on. And those lines, those red-lined areas, were places where the Negroes lived. And so you could not get a home loan or a GI Bill on that area. So, and if a realtor was caught allowing a black person to buy property in this area that wasn't redlined, they could lose their license. Once again, so GI Bill says, yes, we're going to give you money. But the policies behind it say, well, listen, but you can only get money for this for houses that are not in this area, and you can't. And you, as a realtor, you can't purchase or you can't sell this home to a person or when threat of losing your license. So it's leverage. It's always these underlying things. The bill looks great on one level, but then what happens is there are these supporting policies.
Yeah, and the
that undermine it.
So
yes.
Let's talk a little bit. So real estate. I told you we got a bunch of land in my family. My dad, when he died, my granddad had amassed all of the real estate. They had 12 kids. My dad was kind of the, I forgot when they died, he was the one that was over the estate.
Executor?
Yeah, the executor. So he was kind of like, don't sell this land for anything. This is our land. Now, my dad has since passed, and most of my generation has it. And we're in Houston. This is in Louisiana, in backwoods somewhere. We go once a year, have our, family get-togethers and things of that nature. So sometimes I wonder, I understand real estate is important, but for me, I feel like the sentiments, the spirit of what my granddad wanted was for us to be economically sufficient. So for me, I'm invested in real estate. So I'm kind of wondering, sometimes I wonder, well, what's the point of having all this land if it's not generating any monies? And I remember when I shared that with you, you told me you had a similar situation. Your family has a bunch of land, and your generation, the people are arguing, and we're just kind of, so break that down a little bit, and what would be your thoughts on that?
Okay, great question. Historically, number one, African Americans owned hundreds of thousands of acres of farmland right after slavery. But if you watch it matriculate over the years, Really, it's really been cut down probably by almost 70-80%. So most of the land that many of our ancestors died for and fought for we've now lost. We've lost it to a couple of things: property tax
Yeah.
issues, and not making sure that those things or the wheels are set up, and so all the paperwork is not lined up right. Well, luckily enough, in your family and even in my family, my great, I think of my I think my great great grandfather, literally, he and his brother, they amassed all these acres of land and made sure that they were all connected, and then said, "Don't sell them," because they saw the land. Remember, an agrarian society sees the land not as a place where you can go and sit down and fish all the
Yeah.
time, but as a
You can make some
resource.
money.
I mean,
Yeah.
to make some money. I
Yeah.
mean, now to live off of it, it's a matter of making this land work for you. But many of our families, because we've been miseducated, we see it as going down home, and we just kind of go there one day, one weekend, sit around there, but we don't think about turning that land or how to utilize this great resource, because that's what land is. Real estate is a resource, and we don't think about trying to make sure that that resource is protected. So one of the things that we had to do in our family, because what many companies will do is they will go in and they will send Jerome a check for $1,000 or $6,000 and say, "Hey, we see you got land in Louisiana. If you just sign this check and cash it, we'll just take over that for you." And so what that does is that if they can divide the land up, in other words, amongst the areas, and parcel it off into pieces, then even when you have people that say, "No, we're going to hold on to our land," they can go into the local government, they can go into the local and state and county government and say, "We want to do some things of development, and these people are blocking our development," and they can force you, because they have pieced it off into actually selling, getting rid of, at a very low rate. Those are some of the local and state and even county methodologies of it's blight. There's some easements we want to deal with, and they just eat
Yeah.
into it over
Yeah.
over the time,
Yeah.
and then you lose it. Well, Jerome, one of the things our family had to do was we had to incorporate, which means we had to say we had to form a company that would manage the land and put in a corporate structure. And so it wasn't just cousin this and cousin that. We had to put in a corporate structure, and have bylaws, so that when the companies would come in trying to get the land, they wouldn't negotiate. They couldn't send me a letter or check, or you a letter or a check. They had to deal with
The corporation.
our corporation, which was managed by people in our family, and it saved the land, it solidified the land, and then it allowed people who we trusted, and who we had a lot of confidence in, as some business savvy, to go in and say, "Look, these are better deals, or these are things that we can do." Because think about it, there's timber, there's water, there's mineral rights. Now we talk about green energy. So there's wind power.
Yeah.
There's solar power. There's all kinds of things. You could lease out the land to other farmers who may have the equipment for X amount of years. There's a bunch of ways that you can work the land while keeping cattle on there, so you can keep some of your agricultural rights, so that your taxes will drop down. There's ways to do it, but we have to educate ourselves, our families, and really, really stop being the whole divide and conquer piece.
So let's talk a little bit about politics, because ultimately we're talking about economics and the policies that are represented in our society, based upon what you've shared, are designed to direct the flow of the economics. And the key, let's say, players that make the laws are the elected officials and politicians. So
Yes.
personally, I always vote, but sometimes I'm not really, in terms of from a I would say I probably align more with Democrats socially, not necessarily
Yeah,
morally in certain areas and in
I get it.
aspects.
I understand.
But I'm not really, let's just say I'm not the strongest political advocate. But I always vote because my parents told me to, and I understand our ancestors died and things of that nature. I heard you speak once before, and you kind of packaged voting and its impact in politics in such a way where it really made sense to me of, wow, that's why we need a vote. Because sometimes you as one person really feel like, am I really making a difference? Specifically in a state like Texas, where it really doesn't matter who your vote is, particularly for president. It's been a Republican state for so many
Republican
years.
state.
Looks like it's changing now, just like Georgia did. But sometimes people feel like my vote doesn't matter. So what would you say to a person like that?
Well, number one, your vote matters. Let me tell you why your vote matters. First of all, our vote matters, and it's the strongest, Jerome, in the area where we vote the least. Your local politics. That's where it's most impactful, because though it's not your congressman, it's your county commissioner. It's the person who's in your city offices. Those persons that are in your city offices that make the local ordinances and land ordinances and policies and project and processes that most directly impact your family, your children, your economics, your well-being. It's that local group. Most of us don't even vote in midterms or anything else other than we just vote for the president, and then we think we've done our job. Yes, you should vote for the president. Please do that. But where you can have the most pull is on those local judges, those local politicians who control your immediate surroundings, because they mess with your economics. They control your property tax values, the laws that affect you and your children first and foremost. So and they have the immediate impact on what it is that happens. And then you have to realize that and it's so powerful and it's so prominent that even locally here in Texas in the last couple of years, and we've seen it, they call it gerrymandering, where they begin to change voting districts.
Yeah.
Why have they changed voting districts? Because they understood that there's a migration that's happening, like where there's a browning of the South. This group that people are moving to the South.
Yep.
And because of that browning of the South, people of color are moving, young people of color who are more liberal and more progressive. And so they have to divide. They are changing the district voting lines to ensure that there could be no one district where a group of people who are very progressive, they can just come together and just by sheer number literally win. And one good example was that there's a place in Tarrant County, which is around the Fort Worth area, that that had been just by the old voting lines or district lines, it was going to go Democratic. It was going to go Democratic. It was going to go Democratic. Literally, they have that particular district was browner and browner and browner, which means that they were continuing to vote in Democrats. So they just changed just this year. They voted and they changed it, and by dividing the line and redrawing the district, now that district has been divided into two districts, and now the Republicans have a majority of the vote in terms of because they spread it out. When you look at even the presidential voting, what you saw was this: in the urban areas, the core, it was more brown, and so that's where the Republicans were losing the vote. In the rural areas, which was more white, old, and conservative, they were losing the vote, and so this idea of changing these lines and drawing these lines just on the local level, Jerome, can then sway what happens to a state.
Yeah.
You can just change these lines on the local level, and then that will change the outcome of the state or impact the outcome of the state. And the outcome of the state then impacts the outcome of the national. Was I a bit too nerdy, or did that make sense?
No. That was good. No, ultimately what I heard from that is well, this ain't what you said, but let me just tell you how I heard it. While
Okay.
it's important to vote for the president, which is what most people do, it's not as impactful. So that might be why I feel the way I feel in certain respects. But if you only vote for the president, your perspective of voting is limited because you can make a huge impact.
It's literally watered down, Jerome.
Yeah.
It's literally watered down. It's
Okay.
literally watered, but the greatest impact is local.
Yeah.
And if you can impact and direct the local, then you can impact the regional.
Which then impacts the national. Got it. Okay. So lastly,
Yes.
let me ask you, because I know we're running short on time. Let's just talk about growing up. African American, Waxahachie, Texas. What were you taught about money and wealth, or was that even a conversation in the Moody household?
In the Moody household, the conversation was number one, education.
Okay.
It was school, 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 and school. Go to school, go to school, go to school. Both my parents were teachers. And so, and both of them, had gone to school, they both had gone to HBCUs, gone to PV, Prairie View, A&M, and graduated from there with their bachelor's and then their master's degree. And so the school was the way, making sure you handle your business. And then a budget was your way. Now, what's interesting, Jerome, is it wasn't a lot of dialogue about investing. It was school, budget, buy your house, take care and follow your budget. It was school, save some money, buy a house, stay in your budget, and then make sure that the college fund is ready for your children, and then make sure you teach them to be ready for their children. Now, one thing my parents did teach me, which I think was major, was do all that you can to even work hard and pay now rather than take out a bunch of student loans.
Yeah.
And the reason why they said that was because they said you don't want to be paying for this degree over all these years. It's better to be broke for 4 years and be done with it than be struggling for 20 years.
Yeah.
And so now that's one major thing they taught me. So one of my goals has been, even with my children, one of my gifts to them is to get them through school without leaving them. Yeah. With the loan. So what I start when they graduate, I'm like, okay, you got a degree, you don't have $60,000 worth of loans, and you know how to handle money, go for it. But we weren't taught a lot, honestly. Even though, look, I got two master's degree parents. they had master's degree in mathematics, but not necessarily economics, and so we didn't talk a lot about investments or anything like that. That's why I believe that a podcast like this is so important, because you're trying to convey what some people would say everybody should know, but you're trying to convey these truths to our people about how economics, how money works, and how to use money as a resource, how to leverage your money, those kind of things. Money matters, and I believe this is a very, very important time and a very, very important topic.
No, thank you so much, Dr. Moody. And that's exactly what we're doing. I was raised much like you. It's amazing when you talk to people in the same household and you realize their background, how African Americans were taught the same thing, because my dad was the same thing. Save your money. Don't ever use a credit card. Buy you a house. And my daddy said, boy, one thing I'm going to guarantee you, you're going to get your education. So they made sure that each of their kids went through college. They paid for it out their pocket. And they felt like I've done my duty before God and America, by putting you through college. He felt like that was the pinnacle of success. So, but they're giving me a sign here. So, Dr. Moody, we're going to be wrapping up. Go ahead. I'll let you take a couple minutes to talk a little bit about where we can find you, social media, website. I know you guys are doing some amazing things with your C2H program in Austin, Texas. Tell them a little bit about that, where we can find you, and then we'll go ahead and close it on out. Go ahead.
Great. Well, first of all, thank you for the opportunity, Jerome. Thank you guys, because I appreciate you so much. You're a true friend. So I want to let you know that I appreciate you. Well, we're doing a lot of great things here in the city of Austin, Texas. I am a pastor here, but we also have a local nonprofit called the Community Coalition for Health, affectionately known as C2H. C2H. And so you can look at that website. You can look us up on the website at www.c2h.us. C2h.us. You can check us out there. We're doing some amazing things. We have partnerships. We work with Dell Medical School. We work with the city of Austin. We're working with our hospital district, dealing with and really impacting the city and really the county, Jerome, dealing with health inequities and making sure that our voices are heard. The programs go out and direct and get to the people that they're supposed to get to. We worked even during COVID. We've done not just seminars, but we've had vaccination clinics here. We gave, through our partnerships, we actually distributed over $1.3 million of direct funding to people who have been hurting hurting from COVID-related, illness, injury, homelessness, what have you. We're doing a lot of great things. Recently, we are just actually finishing up the first one in Austin, a survey dealing specifically with African American men and health and what their health needs are. And one of our goals is to develop an African American male clinic. And we surveyed over 700 African American men from the ages of 18 to 65. Never been done.
Wow.
Never been done. And so now when we're talking to the city, we're saying, listen, this is what we need. This is what we want. Great things are happening there. We work with diabetes. We're working with a lot of different people. University of Texas. We have some grants in partnership with them, and so school, government, research, health, education. We're doing it all through C2H, and so please check us out. C2H.us. Great website. Great. Donate to us if you want to donate and help us out, or just come in and see how you can donate your time, donate your talent. I can be reached. Also, I also have a couple of books. Probably my the one that's probably the most relevant to this particular topic is Ecological Lynching. It's a book that deals with the systematic destruction of people of color in this city, and it goes through a lot of the history and talks about a lot of the systems. And we talk about the thing that we didn't get a chance to talk about was allostatic load.
Yeah.
How life is structured in such a way, and the systems are structured in such a way that they increase the pressure on us just to live. And that pressure on us just to live is the root cause of heart disease, high blood pressure, diabetes. So you can check us out. Check my book out there, Dr. Charles Moody Jr.com. That's my website there. Twitter, Dr. Charles Moody. So I believe that's it. I appreciate you so much.
No problem. Thank you so much, Dr. Moody. And I am so upset because I did want to talk about that book. The book is brilliant. Let me just chime in. And if you haven't heard of the concept of allostatic load, you need to get that book, learn about it, because it really helps you to understand how not just our political systems, everything from the way the roads are designed, where grocery stores are going to be, where the schools are located, all of that is systematically and strategically designed to reduce pressure in certain areas, but increase pressure for other areas. So it's a magnificent concept, and I thoroughly enjoyed the book. So thank you so much, Dr. Moody. We look forward to having you back on the Black Money Tree podcast.
Well, thank you so much for your time. God bless.
Now, there you have it. The Black Money Tree is doing our part to help you build wealth in order to build your community. And a big part of that is first understanding that there are systems in place designed to keep money in certain people's pocket and out of other people's pockets. So we need to get engaged in the political system. We need to understand how politics works. And we need to begin to educate ourselves with books like Dr. Moody's Ecological Lynching, with closing the wealth gap. Make sure you go to the blackmoneytree.com website. Look at all of our products. We have resources and tools to help you build your wealth, and follow us on Instagram, on Facebook. We look forward to seeing you next time on another episode of the Black Money Tree Podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Black Money Tree Podcast. Don't forget to like and share this video. And if you want more content like this, follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. We'll see you next time.